If you had told me last month that I'd be working in hell, I would have assumed that it was just a creative way of describing freelance content marketing. But no, literal hell. Flames, screaming, a whole 9 damn circles. It started with a job listing that I don't remember finding. I'd been employed for the past 6 months, living off instant noodles and freelance gig writing's top 10s list for shady wellness sites. I was desperate. I was broke. And my rent had officially crossed over into don't bother knocking territory. So when an email popped up in my inbox titled, "You've been selected," I clicked it without hesitation. No sender, no job title, just a glowing red button that said, accept. And the moment that I did, everything changed. The light in my apartment dimmed, my laptop let out a sound like something gasping underwater. And I was yanked. No other word for it, clean out of reality. And with that, I ended up coming into a waiting room. The walls were soft, breathing red. The chairs were velvet and warm, like they'd recently been sat on by someone alive. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon and burning hair. There was a reception desk in front of me. The woman behind it had no face, just smooth skin stretched over her eyes, a nose as well as a mouth should have been, with the word smile carved into the flesh in big, cheerful cursive. She tapped away at what looked like a typewriter made of obsidian and... Were those teeth? "Name?" she asked, without moving her face. "Eric?" I said, standing too quickly and immediately regretting it. My knees buckled, and she clicked once. "Eric Malden, copywriter, occasional poet, one-time food beggar, although that domain has expired. Welcome to hell. HR will see you now." And before I could say anything else, the floor beneath me split open. I didn't fall. I descended, slowly and silently, like an elevator with too much self-awareness. And when the floor closed above me, I found myself standing in a vast corridor. The ceiling was impossibly high, vanishing into shadows. Along the walls were portraits, oil paintings Victorian style, each one depicting someone crying into a phone or realizing they hit reply all by mistake. And at the end of the corridor stood a woman in a pantsuit the color of dried blood, arms crossed and clipboard in hand. "Eric Malden?" she asked, voice clipped and nasal. "Yeah." "I'm Cheryl, HR manager for Soul Experience." She stepped forward, took my hand, and shook it. Her grip was cold, firm, and smelled faintly of toner ink and sulfur. "You're late." "I didn't know that I was coming." "That's not an excuse. We prefer our candidates to read the terms and conditions." "I didn't see any." "They were at the bottom." Of course. Cheryl handed me a thick folder, and on the front, embossed in gold, were the words, "Welcome Packet, Eternal Division, Tier 3, Content Strategy." Inside were forms, W-9s, a liability waiver, something that looked like a non-compete clause written in Latin, and a branded pitchfork pen. "Sign these," she said, already walking away. "By the way, everything you do here is legally binding and emotionally binding, and in 1 or 2 cases, never mind. Follow me." Cheryl then led me through a maze of hallways, each stranger than the last. In one, the floor was made of keyboards, and every step triggered a long-forgotten regret to play back in my voice. In another, the ceiling was lined with televisions playing commercials I was sure that I had seen as a kid. Ads for products that never existed, delivered in voices that sounded like my parents arguing. And finally, we stopped in front of a frosted glass door that read, "Soul Experience, Brand Strategy Team." "Your desk is through here," Cheryl said, pushing it open. The office was bizarrely open concept. Cubicles stretched out in every direction like a DMV designed by MC Escher. My desk sat in the middle, nestled between a gnarled fiscus that muttered obscenities and a coffee station that had emitted low moans and occasional screams. "I'll send over your first assignment," Cheryl said. "Deadline's at the end of the day." "What time is that?" And Cheryl looked at me. "Yes." And then she was gone. The onboarding process wasn't over. After locating my desk, which appeared to be made of tightly compressed apology letters, I found a laminated card titled, Welcome, New Sinner, in Comic Sans, no less. It listed several rules. Rule number 1, don't feed the copier. Rule number 2, if the elevator is humming Barry Manilow, take the stairs. 3, if your desk lamp begins to cry, take a 15-minute wellness break. 4, don't ask about the 4th floor intern. There is no 4th floor. And 5, blog posts must be at least 800 words, SEO friendly, and not trigger apocalyptic events unless explicitly approved by PR. I flipped the card over, and on the back, someone had scribbled in red ink, "Bring your own mug. The break room steals faces." Great. I met my new team over the next few hours. There was Jerry, who said that he'd been in PR since the 1400s and called me sport while trying to sell me soul insurance. Tanith, our creative lead, who hovered 3 inches off the floor and left a trail of glittering ash when she moved. And Lila, from UX, who was in the middle of A/B testing and new onboarding experience that involved traumatic memory loops. Nice bunch, honestly. Better than some of the ad agencies that I'd worked at. I finally sat down, booting up the office terminal, a half-melted iMac that wheezed in binary, and read the brief for my first piece. Title: Why Damnation is the Ultimate Glow-Up. Tone: empowering, trending, slightly menacing. CTA: invite readers to subscribe to our newsletter, The Weekly Whale. I stared at the screen for a long time, and then I cracked my knuckles, took a sip of coffee that tasted like burnt hope, and started typing. And as weird as it sounds, as messed up and surreal as all of this is, I think I'm actually going to be good at this. I didn't sleep the night before the meeting. Not that sleep is really an option here. Hell doesn't do REM cycles. What it does offer are designated rest intervals, which mostly involves lying motionless in your desk chair while your screensaver replays the worst 3 seconds of your life on a loop. And so I watched mine. Me, age 19, crying in a Walgreens parking lot after a girl named Becca told me that I was emotionally ambitious, until the monitor blinked off and a new calendar invite popped up. All hands, quarterly alignment with senior leadership, mandatory, no exceptions. Seriously, we mean it. Location: the Hollow Chamber, B1 level. Time: undefined, but you'll know when it is. Cheryl swung by my desk not long after and dropped a cloak over the back of my chair. "You'll need this," she said. "Is it gonna be cold?" She looked at me like I just asked if fire burns. "No," she said flatly. "It's for the blood mist. Dress code requires full coverage below the neck." And then she was gone again. Like smoke, if smoke wore knitted heels and judged your very soul. The Hollow Chamber was not on the map. I asked Jerry for directions and he just chuckled and muttered, "You'll find it when you're ready, sport," before going back to arguing with a cursed printer about toner prices. Lila was more helpful. "Just follow the smell of scorched ambition," she said, handing me a branded notepad made of stretched skin. "And whatever you do, don't speak unless you're invited to. Lucifer hates being interrupted." I asked if it was more of a presentation or an open forum, and she laughed so hard that she started levitating. And so after a while, I eventually arrived. The chamber door opened without touch. It was made of black glass that didn't reflect anything, just swallowed the light. Inside, the temperature dropped 10 degrees and the air became thicker, like trying to breathe through regret. The room was circular, vast, and mostly empty, save for a semicircle of chairs positioned around a massive obsidian podium. He stood behind it. Lucifer. No horns, no tail, just presence. He was tall, thin, dressed in tailored charcoal slacks and a blood-red button-down shirt rolled neatly to the elbows. His hair was perfect. His face could have been sculpted from marble if marble had been terrified of disappointing itself. He radiated charisma in the way a black hole radiates gravitational pull. And he didn't speak at first. He just looked around the room as the rest of us filed in and took our seats, scribbling notes in silence or pretending to look busy with our soul trackers. The moment that his eyes met mine, even for a half second, I understood two things. One, he knew everything I'd ever done, even the stuff that I justified as not that bad. And two, I really needed to revise that blog draft before he saw it. When he finally spoke, it was with the voice of every favorite teacher that you ever had. Warm, funny, and just enough to cut your throat with if you leaned too close. "Team," he said, spreading his arms like a preacher at a TED Talk. "We are absolutely crushing you three." A polite, synchronized smattering of applause followed. "We're up 17% in moral erosion," he continued, pacing the floor like a CEO walking a very expensive carpet. "Engagement with eternal torment metrics is trending positive. Great work. Sadism ops and soul experience. You've taken brand trust in damnation from hostile to skeptically intrigued. That's a moment, people. That's legacy work." I watched Tanith, our creative director, nod subtly. Jerry whispered something about focus groups and inflation, and Lila was already typing up a follow-up plan to gamify hopelessness. And me? I was trying not to sweat through my cloak. Lucifer clapped his hands once, and a PowerPoint appeared midair, slides rotating slowly without any visible projector. And the title of the deck? The New Hell: Innovation, Image, Influence. "We're modernizing," he said. "The old branding, fire, brimstone, endless screams. That's expected. It's comfortable. But comfort stagnates. We're not just a punishment space anymore. We're a lifestyle, a journey. We don't just break people. We transform them." People murmured their agreement like gospel. And then he smiled and pointed directly at me. "You," he said, and I froze. And everyone turned. "You're the new guy. Eric, right? Ryder." His voice betrayed me, coming out like a middle school band rehearsal. "Yes, sir. That's me." Lucifer's eyes locked on mine. "I read your first draft, the one about brimstone being the new self-cure." My stomach dropped, and so did my metaphorical dignity. It was cute. But we don't do cute. We do conversion. I want readers to finish that post and pray that they end up here. And I swallowed. I can revise it." "I know you can." He smiled wider. "You've got potential. You're just not desperate enough yet." And then, just like that, he moved on. Started talking about ad spend and eternal synergy. The room relaxed. But I didn't. After the meeting, I found myself standing alone in the hall outside the hollow chamber, cloak damp with something. Tanith approached. "It didn't explode," she said, lighting a cigarette that burned with green fire. "That's a good sign." Did he really read my draft? Of course. He reads everything. She looked at me for a long while. "You'll learn, Eric. He doesn't want perfection. He wants pain. That's what resonates." And she walked away before I could ask whatever the hell that even meant. Back at my desk, Cheryl had left me a sticky note in her impossibly neat handwriting. "Next piece due EOD. Title, What to Wear When Everything is Burning. A style guide for the recently damned. Make it funny. Or else." And in the corner of my monitor, my blog dashboard blinked to life with a red flame icon next to the words, "Eternal Metrics. Lucifer is watching. No pressure." I should have known something was off when I walked into the office and Jerry greeted me with, "Spreadsheets are the language of pain," and then winked. Both eyes, like one after the other. But I'll come back to that. Let's talk about Casual Flesh Friday. The name alone should have been a warning. But there it was, circled in bright red ink on the communal calendar that hangs, literally, on the wall outside the break room. The calendar is stitched together from past regrets and dead language, so reading it is always a little emotionally compromising. Anyway, it said, Casual Flesh Friday. Optional participation. Skins or skins adjacent to tire encouraged. No polyester. Violators will be digested. Let's flaunt our meat, team. I figured that it was a joke. A morale thing, like Hawaiian Shirt Day, just with more visible organs. But turns out, it's one of the most strictly enforced dress codes in the entire office. How do I know? Because I wore polyester. Not on purpose, I had no idea. It was a cheap black button-down that I'd picked up on Earth from a department store clearance rack. Back when I thought polyester just meant itchy. I walked in, coffee in hand, ready to start my day when the ceiling above me hissed. Not a mechanical hiss, more judgmental. Polyester, Cheryl said, suddenly behind me, as always. Really, Eric? And I blinked. I didn't. Don't make excuses, she said flatly. The office walls are allergic to synthetics. You've upset the insulation, and now the vents are bleeding again. And sure enough, the ventilation above my desk had started to drip something thick and red that smelled like microwave popcorn and betrayal. Strip, she said, already handing me a spare robe made of what I sincerely hope was imitation sinew. And I changed. I kept the robe. And I've never worn polyester since. Now, about Jerry. The first clue that something was wrong, beyond the double wink, was the way that he started speaking in Excel syntax. "They look up your joy," he muttered at one point, tapping at his keyboard with the intensity of a televangelist decoding a holy text. I asked if he was okay, and he stared at me and said, "Equals if, hope, better than zero, quote error, quote continue," in a voice that sounded like a dial-up modem trying to cry. Lila ran diagnostics, and apparently, Jerry opened a file labeled Q4 sacrifice report _final revision _final.exe without proper sigil clearance. The spreadsheet was cursed. Minor possession. Happens more often than you'd think in admin. The solution? Burn the spreadsheet, purge the RAM with purified irony, and reboot his station using laughter from a sitcom that was canceled before its time. They chose Better Off Ted. And Jerry's mostly fine now. He only hisses in binary when someone mentions pivot tables. But let me tell you about the highlight of my week. My first blog post went viral, not just in hell, but on Earth too. It was titled, "Why Eternal Fire is the New Hot Yoga. 7 Reasons Damnation Might Be Right for You." I went all in on the tone. Confident, breezy, absurdly aspirational. I wrote like someone pitching beachfront property on a river Styx to tech bros. Here's a snippet. Sure, the fire burns forever, but think of it as your own personal sun. Heat is transformation, pain is presence, and screaming? That's just breath work, babe. I even included a call to action at the end. Subscribe to the Weekly Whale for more tips on thriving while you're roasting. And it got traction. Fast. Apparently, back on Earth, a wellness influencer shared it ironically. Then another shared it unironically. And within hours, it was bouncing around Twitter, Reddit, and even LinkedIn. Some readers thought that it was satire. Others thought that it was an edgy new ad campaign for some underground lifestyle brand. But my favorite comment? Low-key thinking this is a vibe? Like, honestly, hell sounds more structured than my startup. And down here, the eternal metrics lit up. A blinking flame icon popped up on my dashboard. Trending on Earth, realms 3, 4, and 7. Engagement rate, 106%. Comments from the damned, 3,012. Lucifer is pleased. Cheryl stopped by my desk without saying anything and set down a mug that read, "You made Lucifer smirk once. Good luck doing it twice." I still don't know if that was praise or a death threat. So, now they're talking of promoting me. Not a big promotion, just a title shift, from junior strategist to associate visionary of eternal branding. I think that it comes with a bigger desk, or fewer desk screams, something like that. There's even a rumor floating around that I'll be invited to the next ideation ritual, where the higher-ups chant brand strategies into a pit and let the smoke decide our Q1 roadmap. But honestly, I'm just happy my blog post got people talking. Maybe even wanting. Which is exactly the point. Hell isn't trying to scare people anymore. We're not just fire and chains. We're relevant. We're marketable. We're rebranded. And I really think, I might have helped make that happen. I don't know what's happening to me. I used to write listicles about essential oils. Now I'm actively selling eternal suffering like it's a wellness retreat. And the wildest part? I think I believe it. So I learned something about the ideation ritual. The first rule of the ideation ritual is that you don't show up on time. You arrive when the hallway starts whispering your name. Not before, not after, exactly when it begins calling to you in your mother's voice. But just off enough to raise every hair on your neck. That's what Tanith told me. She appeared beside my desk Thursday morning, like she always does, drifting in on a draft of stale incense and passive-aggressive pressure. She smelled like ash and spearmint. She always does. "You've been summoned," she said, her voice lower than usual. "Congratulations." I tried to act cool about it, shrugged, said something like, "Neat," which is probably the least impressive reaction anyone ever had to being invited to an infernal brainstorming ceremony. Truthfully, I'd been waiting, dreading it, hoping for it. I heard stories. Every content strategist does. The ideation ritual is where Hell's real campaigns are born. Not from analytics or focus groups, but from the raw, blood-soaked chaos of shared vision. The entire brand division meets in the pit. No, literally, the pit. And pitches ideas directly into the ether. If the ether listens, the campaign gets greenlit. If it doesn't, someone gets absorbed into the marketing substrate. It's not symbolic. And so, at 2:16 p.m., the hallway whispered my name. "Eric?" it said, gently in my mother's voice. Except, she never used that tone unless I was bleeding or crying. I stood, my chair groaning under me, and this time, I definitely heard it whisper something. Coward, I think. Or maybe it was good luck. The voice was new. I made a mental note to check for faces later. The pit is accessed through a janitor's closet that smells like ozone and self-delusion. The space beyond is shaped like a stadium built from bone, teeth, and what I suspect is repurposed corporate jargon. At its center, a raised stone platform carved with glyphs that ripple if you try to read them. A circular trench surrounds it, already filled with gently steaming blood. Lucifer stood at the center, sleeves rolled, shirt collar open just enough to look expensive and effortlessly threatening. He looked like a startup founder who absolutely had people killed. "Ideation," he said, "is sacred and volatile, like fire or customer feedback." He waved a hand and a dozen enormous projections appeared in the air. Dashboards, metrics, campaign overviews, and one horrifying slide that said, "Hell is flatlining with Zoomers." "People are tired," he said. "Not enough fear, not enough hope. Just ennui. We need bold ideas, dangerous ideas." And then his gaze landed on me. "Eric, the match and burn guy. Let's hear it." I hadn't prepared a pitch. I didn't even know that I was pitching. But something inside me clicked in motion. The same thing that helped me once write 900 words about artisanal mayonnaise on a 2-hour deadline. Pure, desperate instinct. I've been thinking about brand intimacy, I started. About relationships. Torment's personal, right? Eternal proximity, unresolved baggage, shared agony. And I took a breath. "Okay, just hear me out," I said, heartbeat in my ears. What if we leaned into the chaos? A dating app for the damned. But not just tortured love. I'm talking about total madness. Lust, grudges, kink, sadness. Real soul-level mess. Let them connect through the worst parts of themselves. Let it be funny, horrifying, but flirty. And I swallowed. And we call it Monster Mash. That got attention. Think about it. You're not swiping for compatibility. You're swiping to find someone whose baggage matches the shape of your hole in eternity. Gluttons for masochists. War criminals with poets. It's grotesque. It's beautiful. It's branding. And then I added, because no one should suffer alone, right? And the blood in the trench bubbled. And Lucifer smiled. After the ritual, people clapped. Real clapping. Someone threw a cursed earpod at my feet. It pulsed slightly. I don't know what that means, but Tanith called it an endorsement. You impressed him, she said on the walk back. That's not easy. I think I disassociated. You did, but productively. She hesitated before floating off to whatever smoke-filled sanctum she disappears to during lunch. Don't get too comfortable, Eric, she said over her shoulder. Hell doesn't reward loyalty. It rewards impact. Back at my desk, something had changed. The chair. The same one that moaned last week. It now had the suggestion of a face forming in the fabric. Cheekbones, a mouth, maybe even eyelids beginning to swell from the upholstery. Hey, I muttered, staring down at it. And it said nothing. But it waited. And as time went on, there then came Delilah. I'm not sure what department she works in, probably public relations or social deception. She doesn't seem to do much besides lean on other people's desks, play with her hair, and ask questions she already knows the answer to. Today, she walked past my desk wearing a pencil skirt designed to cause accidents and a silk blouse that didn't even pretend to be professional. Her perfume hit about a half a second after she passed. Something citrusy, bright, and completely inappropriate for a place that traffics in eternal torment. And she didn't stop, just glanced over her shoulder and said, "Nice pitch, hot stuff," with a wink like a weapon. And my stomach dropped, my productivity with it. Everyone in the office calls her the siren. Not because she sings, not because she derails. No one can focus when she's around. She's HR's unofficial nightmare. No one wants to confront her, but no one wants to sit near her either. She is the embodiment of bad decisions and heels, and somehow, I keep finding reasons to pass her desk. Now, I'm not falling for Delilah. I'm not. Even if she has the kind of smile that makes you forget that you're in hell. Even if she once ate a guy from legal alive just for calling her ma'am. Even if she just invited me to grab drinks after the next blood moon. I am not falling for Delilah. Probably. I sat down. The chair shivered slightly under me. On my screen, the Monster Mash prototype was already loading. And behind me, I swear I heard Delilah humming something. Just under her breath. Just loud enough to notice. The morning started quietly enough. Just the sound of distant mechanical screaming from somewhere deep in the walls. The way it always does around 8:45, I was at my desk, sipping coffee that tasted like overworked anxiety and wood smoke, staring at the glowing dashboard of the Monster Mash trial launch. The beta test had gone live 3 minutes earlier. And by minute 4, we had our first match. By minute 6, a couple in circle 3 had already exchanged 3 winking skull emojis, a blurred photo of a flayed arm, sweet, and a one-liner that just read, "You up?" followed by a tongue made of fire. It was working. A second match appeared, and then a third. Chats opened, closed, reopened with capital letters and excessive punctuation. The algorithm was live, and it was moving. I should have been thrilled. This was proof of concept. The soul pairing interface that I'd pitched as a half-panicked joke in a blood-slicked ritual chamber was now fully operational. I'd even gotten a blinking flame icon at the top corner of my screen that said, "Satan is aware of your contribution." which is the nicest thing anyone said to me since I started here. But I didn't feel excited. I just felt watched. At around 10:12 a.m., Cheryl materialized beside my desk, clipboard in hand, mouth set into a default disapproving line. She didn't greet me. She never does. Just tapped the back of my monitor once with her pen and said, "Lucifer wants you to write a new tagline." For what? I asked dumbly. She stared at me for a beat. "For hell." And I blinked. Like, all of hell? Another pause. "Yes." And then she handed me an envelope. Deep crimson, wax seal. The letters inside were handwritten in black ink that shimmered when I moved it. And in a perfect serifed lettering, it read, "Brand positioning exercise. Reimagine hell's identity. 6 words or fewer. Must evoke dread, inevitability, and invitation. Due at sunset. Hell." And that was all. No instructions, no tone guidelines, no marketing research. Just a 6-word sentence that had to encapsulate the very concept of damnation, and somehow do it better than centuries of fire and brimstone had managed. So no pressure. I turned back to my screen and tried to focus. The numbers were climbing. Thousands of souls connecting, flirting, and sharing trauma and trauma-adjacent emojis. In a way, it was beautiful. But in another, more accurate way, it was deeply disturbing. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but my mind wandered, mostly to the plant. It had started as a dull, crispy little thing. Just another failed attempt at adding life to a workplace literally built on eternal suffering. But lately, it had grown. Too much. Too fast. The leaves were now glossy and wide, pulsing faintly when I typed. And this morning I noticed a new vine curling slowly towards my wrist, like it had an opinion. I pulled my hand back, but the vine just followed. "You're blossoming," the plant whispered, its voice low and papery. "It's intoxicating." I blinked. "Are you flirting with me?" "You're growing. That's attractive." I sighed, pushing the vine aside and turned back to the screen. I had 6 words to change the underworld's identity, and now my desk greenery was trying to date me. It also didn't help that Delilah had entered the room. You hear her before you see her. The click of her heels, slow, deliberate, like she's giving floor time to prepare for the weight of her presence. She smelled like warm sugar and high-stakes gambling. Her blouse was unbuttoned just enough to be a problem, and her skirt just tight enough to suggest the rules were optional if you were hot enough to ignore them. And she was hot enough. And everyone knew it. In case you had forgotten, Delilah was the office siren. Not a mythical creature, but the real-world kind. The kind that you find in every workplace. Stunning, flirty, deliberately chaotic. Not particularly productive, but always present. Always watching, and always close. She perched herself on the edge of my desk without asking, dragging one high heel slowly across the floor like a blade. "You and I need to talk synergy." I didn't answer. I was pretending to look very busy rearranging punctuation marks. And she leaned in closer. "You're on fire, Eric. The app's buzzing. The boss is looking at you. Everyone is." "I've noticed," I muttered. "I think it's time," she said, one hand sliding slightly across my desk toward my wrist. "You and me. Something collaborative. Something disruptive." And the plant hissed. And then I coughed. "You're sitting on my expensive reports." "I'm sitting on opportunity." She said it without blinking. And then she smiled. A wide, devastating curve of red, and hopped off the desk just as suddenly as she had arrived. "Drinks tonight?" she called over her shoulder. "Somewhere private. Let's align our passions." I didn't respond. I was too busy trying to remember how to breathe. The envelope sat still on the desk beside me, its wax seal cracked but somehow still watching. I opened a blank document and stared at the cursor. 6 words. That was it. The problem wasn't the writing. It was the honesty. I tried a dozen versions. Burn better, stay forever, bring friends. Sin happens, we help it stick. Hell, the final wellness retreat. And none of them felt true. I sat there for nearly an hour. The plant stroked my shoulder, the lights dimmed, and somewhere in the distance, a fax machine was sobbing. And then, without thinking, I typed, "Hell, you were always coming here." And the words sat there, heavy and certain. That was it. There wasn't a doubt in my mind. No tagline, slogan, or carefully polished pitch had ever hit with such blunt certainty. It was honest, terrifying, a little seductive. In other words, perfect. Moments later, the flame icon on my screen burst to life, brighter than usual, burning deep crimson, nearly humming through the monitor. Lucifer has seen your work. Response: disturbing, final, approved. Proceed. And just beneath that, new assignment, welcome kit rebranding. Position: project lead. Assigned to Eric Malden. Effective immediately. And I sat back in my chair, the cushion exhaling like it had been holding its breath for weeks. The plant made a small purring sound and whispered, "Look at you, a rising star." I didn't reply. I was still trying to decide if I felt proud or like I just signed something with more than my name. And across the room, Delilah looked up from her phone, smirked at me like she had heard the news before I had, and then went back to adjusting her blouse. So, project lead. Lucifer approved. A tagline already bouncing across half the lower planes. Looks like I'm going to be busy for a while. But hey, if you're curious what happens next down here in Hell's marketing department, if you want the inside scoop on tortured team meetings, cursed copywriting, and why my desk is slowly developing a pulse, drop a comment below. Maybe I'll keep you updated. I've got a feeling I'll be seeing at least one of you again soon. In fact, I'm sure of it. Exactly 3, 2, 1. Hey! Welcome aboard.